Hello, party people. Welcome to the People's First podcast, a space where teachers may address the challenge of viewing themselves as people first and teachers second. Today we are talking with Miss Stefanie Davis, my former theater director, teacher, and friend now. Today we are going to be talking with Miss Davis about what vulnerability and self-care work can look like for teachers in real life settings, when and how this work is important and relevant, and how we can be advocates for ourselves as teachers and for others, as well as our students, moving forward. Hello, Miss.
Hello, Miss Emma. How are you?
Good.
Good.
All right, well, let's get into this thing
Yeah.
then. In terms of professional development, maybe briefly, can you just go over what this work can look like?
Yeah, absolutely. This year obviously has been different. And we're not sure how different next year is going to look. And even moving forward, there are some like high level discussions happening at the township level for us of what this is going to look like moving forward, because this year we have had students in some format, one way or the other, on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then Wednesday has been all day professional development. That looks for us like we had organized small group PD sessions in the morning, and then we could meet with, for instance, grade level. I teach high school, so grade level or similar cohorts. After that, we had leadership meetings, but the bulk of that Wednesday time was set aside for us. To do what we needed to do during that time moving forward. So number one thing I think is looking at trying to figure out a way to get the organizations that we're involved with to protect our personal time a little bit with that. We spend a lot of time talking about, well, when you meet with your department, you can, and when you meet with the other teachers who teach your same subject, but we then don't give the time to do that. So time protection, I think, is number one. We flourished with this year. It was an absolute game changer. I think it was the difference for many teachers between staying in a classroom all year and not, in all honesty, was having that Wednesday time. There were a lot of discussions about early retirements this fall. And I think that got to not happen because of where we were with that. And additionally, then as far as the organized pieces of the puzzle, we have allowed some teachers' choice time where teachers could run kind of small group 20-minute little mini sessions during that organized PD time to teach something that they were passionate about to other teachers, and then teachers would choose what they wanted to go around to. I have been kind of the person driving the teacher self-care car, I guess, this year at the school. And so when we did the first round of those, I was able to meet with about 28 of my peers and go through teacher self-care and kind of some ways to look at that, why it's important, and talk about it directly. I think sometimes hearing that directly from someone who has personal experience and needing to really focus on what their self-care mental health picture is going to look like is really important. And so I'm one who's very, very out with my struggles and my needs in those areas. And so talking to my peers really opened a door that wouldn't have been open earlier. We have a lot of resources within our contract that allow us additional assistance over the course of our time with the corporation. And a lot of people just kind of ignore the emails. And so really valuable resources have been available that they haven't necessarily taken full advantage of. So that has been really helpful. Also on like the free and easy, our school social worker reached out to an area dog rescue this fall, and they had puppies. And so they brought in like 12 puppies during that Wednesday PD time and just camped out in the front of the building with like a mama dog and 12 puppies. And we could just go play with puppies. They were there for about an hour and a half. So the puppies were done by the time it was their first public outing. They were tired. But we could just go down and be with puppies for an hour. And yeah, that's a valuable use of time because it gets you reset so that you're more productive afterwards, and you're mentally healthier afterwards if dogs are your thing, and they are my thing. And so it was just a matter of, and we ended up with, like, it benefited the rescue because one of the dogs got adopted on site. Like, she went home the next day, sort of gig. Yeah, it was fast. So they were great. It was good socialization for the puppies, and for us, it was an ability to like connect with that touching things. We can't touch each other right now, but I can hug a puppy. And so for those of us specifically who are animal people and or are craving that touch piece of the puzzle right now as part of our self-care routine, being able to pet a baby dog. They were like right at 8 weeks. It was, they were so cute. And all named after our gang character. No, not our gang characters. This group was Charlie Brown characters. So like Lucy and I were BFFs. She was so cute. The media specialist kept chasing me around going, Stefanie, I think your dog needs a puppy. And I'm like, my dog does not need a puppy. It's the last thing my dog wants is another dog coming home. But it was delightful to be able to, like I said, it benefited them and it certainly helped us. And so there've been some small things like that over the course of the year to allow us to connect in a way that we wouldn't normally have been able to over the course of the normal school day and or given kind of normal, very small periods of professional development.
Right. And you guys have a decent amount of professional development compared to other townships as well, right?
Yeah, even within the normal school year, we are an early release on Wednesdays, and then we have an hour or so dedicated specifically to professional development on those days. Our mini meetings on Wednesdays right now are running about 45 minutes because they are running 2 of them to keep them in smaller groups, and they're running virtually right now. So yeah, we have a significant amount. We are working with, just so that anyone listening who knows these letters will know what we're talking about. We're a TAP school. So we're working with NIET. We're kind of very tight, I guess, with NIET as far as our professional development model. And so they've given a significant amount of support. We're on a grant with them right now that allows for some additional resources. Like we hired 10 mentor teachers in our school this last year to allow for more teacher professional development. And I've been lucky enough to get one of those positions and be serving as a mentor teacher amidst this also. So being able to have those touch points where people know that they've got someone nearby. With 10 people in the building, you got somebody in your hall who you can reach out to if you need to run something past them.
Right.
Yep.
Just kind of.
Sorry, I know this is getting ready to happen right now. Let me take care of him for a second. Dogs. Okay, come on, Esther. Come on, this way. Let's go this way. Where do you think you're going? Is somebody coming home with other problems? Yeah, up, come over here. Yep, all done. No more puppies. Bye-bye, puppy. I know Mama's gonna close a door on you. Is that mean? Probably. Is it gonna work? Maybe. All right. Bye-bye, boy. Okay, here's hoping. Sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. Bandit was like, what is going on? Where's
what on? Somebody's working over there.
But no, okay, so you were talking about, kind of jotting down notes as we go here. With the way that you guys have a normal school year set up, versus now, like you have a lot more time for professional development to occur to allow for like that choice time that you talked about. Whereas like in a normal school year, like that time is shortened. However, you do have it still. Like you guys are a district that's fortunate enough to have it.
Yeah, for sure.
So for districts who have that already or who are trying to figure out times to work that in, as far as like what it looks like for you guys or what it could look like for someone else.
Yeah.
What do you see like that choice? Like, do you feel like that choice time could be built into that shorter amount of time? Like, what would that look like?
Yeah, for sure. And our choice time was kind of interrupted. We have had, I think it's important to know, 7 or 8 different teacher schedules this year because of the nature of in school, out of school. There was a period of time where our school only was shut down for an additional 2 weeks because we had 25 teachers out sick and a 39% substitute fill rate. And so we got our choice time got cut in half from where it was intended to be. It was supposed to be a 2-week round, but we are given only 20 minutes. So if you want to, if you've got a school that's really limited on time, you can do it in 20 minutes. You can get it done. It may take a couple weeks to get people through a couple sessions of it. And it varied. It was me doing that kind of like how to take care of yourself piece of the puzzle. It was my next door neighbor teacher did a session on using like an online publishing tool to make things prettier. Some people did some like, here's a piece of technology that's really worked for me, or how to set up my classroom that's really worked for me while I've got people here and people there all over the place. And so it's going to be this guy until I take him out to potty. I'm sorry, Emma.
No, you're fine. I can edit.
Yeah, we'll be back in just a minute, I promise. People are starting to come home, so he wants to go see.
Oh, I understand.
Come on. Come on. Come on. I want to hear you. I do. And then once they put those together and made sure there wasn't anything that was really a duplicate, they sent out a Google form and said, rank which ones you'd like to go to. And they limited it to between 20 and 30 people per session, depending on kind of what it was being covered, and ran those as needed. I was supposed to have another session, but again, we got cut in half because of being remote again for a period of time. So, but it works really well. And the teachers like a break from hearing from the regular professional development people, as much as those folks are always specially trained and really great at it. Hearing from the person 3 doors down is always going to carry a bit more weight with it. And you've got, in any school, you've got such a wealth of people with special skills. Not using them is ridiculous. Like, let somebody who doesn't normally teach the teachers teach the teacher something cool that they've learned. And especially in the last year, we've all picked up so much weirdness as far as special skill sets. I think that becomes even more true now.
Right. And just like that familiarity that comes from like getting to learn from someone that you already have a relationship with. I mean, it's the same with teaching your students, right? Yeah. Like, if you have a deeper connection with your students, you're more likely to like help them garner more from like the education that you're trying to afford them, because
Absolutely.
they're more willing to trust you.
Well, and one of the kind of evaluation areas for us on that rubric that's used when we're being evaluated in our classroom is questioning. And it always, you don't get to the highest score unless you turn it back over to the class for them to generate the stuff. And I think that sometimes we miss that step with us. We've got a building full of content experts who are becoming rapidly tech experts in their own field by need, if for no other reason. And there's no reason not to turn it back over to them. Let them talk. They've got ideas. And just because you've got a title after your name doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to feel like you're the person who has all of the answers.
No.
And I think sometimes leadership gets a little stressed on that piece of the puzzle. And if you don't tap the people a little bit further down the food chain for whatever it is, and allow them those outlets to share their specialties, then people are never going to learn those pieces.
Right. And I think that's like another thing that like just allowing teachers the space to teach about things that they are passionate about besides the subject matter that they're already going to be teaching. Like, that's just a given. Like, it's your job to do that. But like, when you allow teachers that space to do it, whether it is with their colleagues or whether it's with their students, like, everyone gets more from that experience. Like, everyone's cups are a little more full from allowing that to happen. And
that's really essential right now and forever and ever. Amen. I think kind of the giant has been awakened a bit over the course of this, as far as the importance of that filling your own cup piece of the puzzle. And I think many folks have become more aware of how much we've kind of glorified the teacher/martyr societally. The expected quantity of sacrifices that are to be made, how every other relationship other than your professional one is supposed to come second, third, fourth, 20th, how you are, it's known that you literally can't do the job without doing things that are not in your contract. Like there are so many pieces of that puzzle that people have gone, wait a second, I've had to step back from a little of this to keep remotely close to functional over the course of this. Should I choose to go back to where I was?
Mm.
And I think that looking at that kind of quote unquote normal piece of the puzzle, can't go back to what was normal or viewed as normal before, because it wasn't healthy. We were in an unhealthy relationship with our careers by and large.
And I mean, that affects life at home, that affects friends, like that affects everything. It affects your students.
Yeah. And I told my kids, I'm like, I'm again real open with them about a ton of stuff. And so they knew when the vaccination dates were going to be and how many weeks after that one will you be kind of okay. And I was like, here's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to seeing friends again, because since this thing started, I have seen my parents and my brother once, because my parents are in their 70s and I'm in a room with a bunch of high school students every day. So I'm a disease vector. Um, and as I told my mom early in this, I'm like, I know you want to see us. I don't care. I don't want to kill you.
Yeah.
Like, I got mental health issues. You can't throw that one on my shoulders. That won't go well. And so that piece of the puzzle, but I did spend some outside, very selective time with friends last summer. But once school started, I'm like, I'm the dangerous one. Not even the nurse in the COVID wing is as dangerous as I am, because she's at least got good enough PPE. Like, I burst out laughing the week before spring break because they gave us two of the, it's not an N94, it's something or other N94, two masks in March. Two in March of the second March of the pandemic. And we had gotten like a cloth mask earlier in the year also, but like, as far as those protective pieces, a lot of them have been what we're bringing in. Again, what the expectation of what we're being provided with professionally versus what is expected of us professionally is not necessarily the same gig. So I'm like, it's been an expectation all year for me that I've been sacrificing all of my other relationships so that I can keep you guys and me healthy enough that I'm not adding to the 25 sick teachers and the 39% subfill rate.
Right.
And so a lot of those pieces, like I mean, yes, you can have game nights via Zoom. Yes, you can. But it's not the same, and we can't pretend it is.
No.
And
anyone who like our love languages are all different.
yeah.
And if you're someone who, like, my love language, my number one is physical touch. Like,
yep.
Pandemic, not
Killing
a good
me. Yes.
My friend Alexis is like, no, I'm good. I don't want to hug you anyway. But I'm like, I am dying to like my
yes.
arm.
Yes.
So yeah, like if you're someone, and also like extroverts and introverts both, like there are times where you just need to be around people that brings you a certain energy that you
yes.
that you need, again, just to fill your cup. And like, without having that present, I mean, it's been so much harder for everyone.
Yeah,
especially
for sure.
like, if you're being as responsible as you have been, like as an educator, like it's just, that's so much more sacrifice that you're making.
Yeah, and I will say, for whatever it's worth, and for me, it's worth a lot, because I am so focused on building a personal relationship with my students, that the kids have been ridiculously generous through this. They really have been. Like, some jokes, but also like, Ms. Davis, we're not asking you to do that. Please don't do that. And I told them before break, I'm like, I'm not grading stuff over spring break. I'm not. It can wait until we're back. I haven't had like an actual vacation where I haven't had to do school stuff in over a year at this point in the game. So I need to like turn it off for a hot second. I need to focus on getting a needle in my arm the second time, and I need to focus on unplugging from the crazy. And like 3 of the kids were like, yeah, don't do anything. We don't want, if you grade anything, we're going to be mad at you when we get back. Because they understand and they get it. And I think sometimes and given it's high school, which is inherently different than if I were teaching elementary school as far as levels of comprehension and empathy development and all that kind of fun stuff. But I think sometimes we forget. I've got 16 through 18-year-olds in class, and they pretty much get it. Like they're pretty far along in understanding on those pieces, and just being honest on like, hey, I'm having a rough week this week with it, and here's what I'm doing about it, because I believe modeling that is important for them. But just so you know, it's maybe not going to be like tap dancing pyrotech Miss Davis this week. It might be a little bit more subtle this time around, because I have to kind of turn it down a little bit in order to keep me in the game.
Right.
And they've been cool.
And that piece that you talked about just now, like about modeling, like that's such a huge part of what I'm trying to communicate to people here. Like, it is okay if your students see you struggle. It is okay if your students see you fail. It is okay if your students see you break down every once in a while. It's not preferred.
Right.
But like, if they, like, you never know what their life is like at home. Like what emotions are their parents showing them? What messages are their parents sending them? And like, not to say that every parent is failing their child in that regard, but everyone's experience is different. And if they're never encountering adults who are okay with having those moments, okay with failing and getting back up and pushing harder, or being okay with struggling on a daily basis with any kind of mental health disorder or otherwise, like, then when they encounter that in life, whether it's in elementary school, high school, or as an adult, like they don't know how to cope. And like, talk about teacher burnout. Like, when teachers don't know how to do it, like how are their students ever going to learn? And how are future teachers ever going to learn? Because for the kids who are going to become the teachers.
And if our coping mechanisms are toxic, then that passes on also. If our gut is, I'm struggling, so I'm going to bury myself more in workload and not come up for air, I'm then modeling that thought process for my students and being like, hello, here's how functional adults work. And it's not true. And B, I had a real moment a couple years ago where I stepped back when a really great student who would be a brilliant classroom teacher was like, I've decided I want to be a teacher. And my gut reaction was to say, no, don't do it. And that's not fair to future children who would benefit from how amazing that student's classroom would be. But what it came down to was I was so buried in that piece of the puzzle that was not a lifestyle I would have wished on my students. And that really made me take a step back and be like, wait a second. Every time we compliment a teacher, it seems like we're saying the best compliment we can give them is that they never leave the building.
Right.
That's not a compliment. That means you can't function. Like that's a detriment. They need to see you having a life outside and being able to balance it in order to become a future teacher who has a life outside and can balance it. Right. And being honest about those pieces, I think, is so essential. Because again, it goes back to that kind of martyrdom complex of like, I mean, I know I have to work 12 hours every day, every weekend, but I chose to be a teacher. No, stop that. Most of us are building our own curriculum. Like, build yourself a break every once in a while, y'all. Like, I intentionally look and try to fix. I'm like, when do I want the research paper due? When do I want to be grading research papers? The answer is not over spring break.
No.
So they're not going to be due right before spring break, because I would want to then grade them then. When do I want to grade them? I want to grade them a week that my speech students are delivering speeches.
Yeah.
So that they're more on their own and I can use that time to check in with them, but also focus on some other grading when I don't have masses of grading to do. I sure as heck don't want 60 something speeches and 48 research papers coming in on the same day. We can fix it. You're controlling your schedule, write it well. And that was a hard learned lesson, because there were so many years where it's like, oh, why is everything due at the same time? Because I'm building it that way. I did that. That wasn't someone else doing it to me. And that was in a time where also I had a heavy duty extracurricular involvement. I look back to my master's and I don't know how I survived, honestly, because I was, for a good chunk of that, I was directing. I was in 3 different classrooms while I was working on that. So I moved classrooms 3 times. I picked up a different textbook, shifted an English class, picked up the research class amidst that, was doing master's work and directing 2 shows and dealing with a student written 1-act evening. I did it. My fault. Uh, and so that I think is something that you have to look at and be like, okay, what is benefiting me from the schedule? That is an important question. And it is a valid question. What you are doing as an educator should benefit you also. And then B, is everything I'm doing actually benefiting my students? And it was the hardest internal discussion of my life. That's an overstatement for effect. Maybe the second or third hardest internal discussion of my life to step away from the theater piece of the puzzle, because theater does feed me, but it wasn't at that point in time.
Right.
And I was kind of constantly in a creative rut. And so I didn't feel like I was in any way, shape, or form giving the best experience to my students at that point. And I knew that someone with a fresh set of eyes would do better by them. And I didn't want to be hurting their theatrical process. And I don't think I got to that point. I think I jumped ship before I did. But for sure, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't serving me. It wasn't feeding me. It was another thing on the to-do list. And I was in a rut, which never serves the students. If you hit a point where you're phoning in part of it, it's not serving your students. I just saw a post on social media the other day, something about like that their aunt or uncle had stepped away from teaching, and 35 minutes later, the position was posted on the website. Like, they'll find the next person.
Right.
They'll find the next person. You aren't, no matter what, you aren't that important. And you are, but they'll find the next person. Like, I fully believe that, like, anything I do, I want to be the best person qualified to do it, but they'll find the next person if I'm not.
Right. And maybe they won't do the job as like well as you did in some regard, but they're
Right.
still gonna do the job.
Yeah.
And at that point, like, they're not your students anymore. Like,
Yep.
as weird as that sounds, like, it's
Yeah.
not, and it's not like, it is your duty as a teacher to do for your students.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also so important that you just keep on existing. I think it, like, when you said that you don't know how you survived during that period of your life, that was huge for me, because
Yeah.
why are we treating our lives like we have to do anything and everything to the point where we're like, I'm barely surviving here.
Right.
When we send out the signal, but I don't actually want the help. Like, what?
Right.
What's
Yes.
that? Because it doesn't benefit you. It's not making you a better person. It's not making you grow.
No.
All it's doing is exhausting you and burning you out faster.
Yes.
Like, the ability that you had in that moment, and that I'm sure like many people either do find or don't find, is like that moment of self-reflection where you were able to like actually step back and be like, okay, I'm barely surviving. How am I hurting myself? How am I hurting my students? How can I change that? Like, that's not something that everyone takes the time to do, but it's so important that they do. And it can be something that maybe you talk out with other people, like you talk out with your colleagues, you talk out with your family, you talk out with your friends, but ultimately, like, you or yourself, if you're journaling at night for 10 minutes, like, that's, if you're having these discussions in one way or another, that's what matters.
And that was maybe the funniest part of this whole thing, because again, I'm pretty effusive and open with everyone. I told no one of that decision. Literally no one. And I started gaming the system to end up with the end result I wanted long before I let anyone into it, because I wanted that AP research class real bad. And I wanted the dual credit speech class real bad. And so I started making moves, and the master's was part of that, in that direction, before I stepped down from the theater, because I knew once I stepped down from the theater and I was the person in the building who could do that, that I needed to be somebody else. What was the new identity going to be? And now I'm the only person in the building with either of those other options as far as qualifications. And so I set myself up in a really good position before the theater went away. But you know that I've got a few real good friends in that building, and they knew nothing until the day I went in to meet with the principal to tell him I was resigning from the theater position. Nothing. They knew no things. And let me tell you how that meeting went. And this is a few principles ago, so it's kind of safe at this point in the game. If you think you're that important, that meeting was 2 minutes long. I had been a director of theater in that job for a third of the history of that building. And that meeting was 2 minutes.
Wow.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Send me an email so I can get the position posted.
That's just, I mean, that speaks volumes. 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm. 2 minutes. I went back upstairs, and my next door neighbor teacher was like, "Have you had that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm back." She's like, "What?" I'm like, yep, I'm back. That was it.
They're not going to fight you.
No,
because that doesn't serve them.
No,
it doesn't serve their time. It doesn't serve like it doesn't, because they know that if you're stepping down when you've been that committed,
yeah,
and you're making a decision and you're really like sticking to it, it's for a reason.
Yes.
It's not hard to, I don't know, to honor people's decisions when they are like, when there's a reason for them.
Yes, for sure. For sure. And I was like, I want to keep this one part. And the answer was, cool, we're not paying you for that anyway. So I'm like, all right, well, 2 minutes, bye, have a good day. Like, they aren't. And I had all the like willingness to like share the reasons, but he knew.
Yeah.
You know, and so it became a really weird period. This year's the strange one, because in the eyes of no one at Perry Meridian High School who is under 18 was I ever director of theater, because none of them ever knew me in that capacity. So it's all toast. Institutional memory short, man. All you have to do is 4 years, and it either never happened or it always happened.
Mm-hmm.
The second we hit the 4th year of that student written one act evening going on, I had told my co-producer, I was like, FYI, we're in year 4. This always happens. And she's like, I don't think. And I'm like, and then she was like, they were like, yeah, we do this every year. She's like, it's been 4. I was like, I told you. Institutional memory is short. Mm-hmm. And so it will move on with or without you. It got there before you arrived. It will be there after you retire. So you have to figure out what you're going to do to make the time that you are there beneficial for everyone in the building. And number 1 on that list needs to be you.
Right. I think that's a really good segue for kind of what I wanted to talk about next.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the fact that you have made an effort, especially in recent years, to do this kind of work for yourself.
Yeah.
And you, like you've said several times in our conversation just now, like you were pretty open with that with your students as well as your colleagues, which is, just to me, like that's a given. But I know not for most people. There are a lot of people that high, because I'm also just a very open person. But as far as like becoming an advocate for yourself, and you talked about earlier like considering what people's personal experiences can be with their mental health, and like focusing on what their mental health picture is going to be moving forward. What did that look like for you? And also within that, I would really love to hear you talk about like the boundary work that you have worked into your life, because you've talked a lot about like teachers not taking personal time and like prioritizing the different compartments of their lives is something that really seems imbalanced. And so like working in those boundaries to make that prioritization more possible. I'd like to hear how you've done it or how you think other people do it.
Yeah, kind of my hand was forced, honestly, because there was no hiding what I was going through at the point in time that I was going through it. Um, I had an off the clock traumatic experience about 10 years ago where a home blew up very near me and it triggered some stuff. And I was having flashbacks at school and like bursting out sobbing and needing to have moments of getting the class covered. And like, I couldn't hide from it. It wasn't anything that was going away on its own. And I did all of the bad things that you're not supposed to do as a mental health patient in those situations, like not asking for help, not using all of those resources I tell people are awesome and they should go use, because I have discovered I am a bit of a control freak. And so I spent a lot, Emma, don't laugh. I have spent a long period of time. I spent a long period of time before I called a doctor trying to figure out how to tell the story of my experience. And when I walked in to the doctor, I was like, I need to say a few things before you do. And she's like, okay. And like, I just need to float these out into the universe because I'm pretty sure you're going to float them back to me. And I just need to be the first person to have said them. And I said bipolar depression, PTSD, and generalized anxiety disorder. Now let's chat. And she's like, okay. And we got to the end. She's like, how long ago was this? I'm like, year and a half. She's like, she's like, yeah, well, you got the diagnosis right, at least. So we started kind of down a mental health rabbit hole that was really new to me at that point in time. And that's only been 10 years ago. So I was mid to late 30s when that was going on. And so as that started, I started seeing a talk therapist and started on some intermediating medications. The medications worked for me. Talk therapy was hit and miss. And so we kind of pulled back on that one and stuck with the meds, and that was regulating it really well. But that was all happening. I didn't get to like take a TV time out for a year and a half because I was driving the struggle bus at school. Like I was still doing all those crazy extracurricular things and disassociating while that was happening. And like, I will never forget, we're sitting I'm sitting next to my co-producer at the one act rehearsals, and she saw it happen, and I'm like staring down at my lap at my phone, not doing anything, just staring at it. And she texted me with, do you need anything? Is there anything I can do? And I just shook my head no and kept disassociating. And like I'd already, by the time I sat down, taken my meds. It was going to take a few more minutes for everything to kick in. But those were things that were still happening, and it wasn't not noticeable. So for sure, I started with talking to people kind of up the food chain from me, up the through line of leadership. So department chairs, all of the administrators knew what was going on at that point in time, and teachers who were near me in case I needed something. I didn't really start to completely out with the kids immediately. I don't remember if I talked to them that first year or not. I know I did the second year. I don't remember if I talked to the first year with the kids or not. But I teach public speaking. And so it just so happens that early on in the semester, we talk about stage fright. And through the discussion of stage fright, I'm like, okay. And it just kind of happened the first time. I didn't plan to go out myself to a room full of high school students the first time. It was just kind of what happened. Because as we drew like the figure of like what's going on in his brain and the chemical release and all of this, like I wanted to stress with them that when they see their friend having a panic attack, it's like a physiological thing. It's a thing. Chemicals in your body are actually moving around and actually making your body do things. It's not like you're thinking too hard and it's making you disassociate. It's a chemical process. And just like if your friend walks up behind you to scare you and you jump before you realize that it's just your friend, that fear response is legit. It's not fake fear because it's your friend. You don't know that. Your body has interrupted that thought process at that point in time to figure it out. And so when I got him drawn up there with his like forehead sweat and rapid heartbeat and shallow breathing and wobbly knees and going pale and feeling like he was going to vomit, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was me like last week. And I was like, all right, let's take a TV timeout for a second and talk about the fact that like most people, when they have a fear response, don't turn into this guy, but some do. And one of them is standing in front of you talking to you right now. And so here's a little bit of the history, and I talked them through what that night was, and what the path to seeking help was, and what my current, at that point in time, kind of treatment plan was. I was not doing talk therapy anymore by that point. I was just doing meds, and that was working beautifully. And then I said, the thing is, I don't tell you this because I need like a room full of sympathetic 15-year-olds. That's not what this is. This is not grandstanding. This is, number one, if your understanding of bipolar depression comes from what you see in movies and TV shows, then you expect me to be completely non-functional, like ranting on a street corner, drinking out of a paper bag. And so seeing, some of you have never met an adult who is in a functional career path with a mental health concern. Ta-da. Nice to meet you. Second of all, we see that between 1 in 4 and 1 out of 5 students will be on some sort of mood altering medication before they graduate high school, which means that in any room where I'm teaching this public speaking gig, between 1 in 4 and 1 out of 5 of them are personally relating to a huge portion of the scary, shaky guy back behind me. And I need, especially in a public speaking class where that's a huge fear for most of us, I need those people to understand that the person who's grading them behind the table with a red pen gets it.
Right.
And also knows there's a path around it and won't easily let you use it as an excuse, but we'll figure out a way to get there from here. No matter where you are on that spectrum right now, we will figure it out. And I have watched everything from students just like a smile and nod as that's going on, to students like trying to hide the tears. I had one completely disassociate in class while we were talking about it. We had to like walk a path with that one for a while. But every year I have at least one kid who comes up because of those moments of honesty with, hey, I don't know how to get help. Cool. Let me introduce you to our school social worker. She's a rock star. And so just if that's all, if I get one kid a year, I'll take an extra pill in the morning and get through what it triggers in me to say it in order to get that done. And even the kids for whom that's not their personal experience, they are like, oh, my friend had a panic attack like last month and I didn't get it, but now I kind of get it. Or, I get nervous, but I don't get that nervous, so I'll be fine with this. Like the pieces of the puzzle and seeing themselves on a spectrum between nervous and dissociative is incredibly important. And like I said, giving them, again, you're modeling. I'm modeling how to talk about my mental health. I'm modeling, okay, we're going to do some relaxation activities. Let me tell you out of this what works for me and what I do every time. And kind of giving them some starter tools to help them move down the path. And, the first thing, the last kid who came up and was like, hey, you need some help. And I'm like, okay, have we talked to parents? Kind of, but I don't think I said it right. I'm like, okay, we're going to start with there, because there was obviously a willingness and a safety in talking to parents in that situation, but definitely reaching out to some of those people in the building who know stuff. We are fortunate enough to have an in-building social worker, and she has been obviously working triple time this year, and like, here's more, sorry. But counselors, we have tons and tons of resources on being able to make sure that those kids are being given the tools that they need beyond what the classroom teacher can offer them, because I am not a licensed therapist. I can barely be responsible for my own mental health. Sometimes I can't take on 150 high school students, but I can point them in the right direction. And I can give them oh, hey, Ms. Davis said that was a thing with her too, in order for them to kind of grab onto, whether it's their personal experience or someone they know or just something they see on TV.
Right.
Yeah. The second part of that, I feel like I missed something in there while I was
The boundary work, but I
boundary work.
we can go over it for a second though, because
Okay.
even hit on a few things that you talked about.
Yeah.
When you were talking about like dissociating and
Mm-hmm.
how that was happening to you, um, hard question.
Yeah.
How do you think that directly affected your ability to like be present in the classroom, to teach,
Well, I wasn't present in the classroom is the easiest answer to that.
to reach your students, like like because the effects like they had to be there.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a really, really important part specifically to talk about is like doing all the work that you just talked about and also allowing students to do that work and encouraging
Yeah.
them to do that work is also important because teachers in particular are, I read it the other day, it's like some percentage more likely to end up with some form of a mental health issue
Yeah.
than any other profession.
Yeah.
Like it's
Secondary trauma is not a lie, even if you don't have any primary trauma. Secondary trauma is a real thing.
right. And aside from that, like I think that what I was reading was talking about how even if teachers have never had experiences with depression, anxiety, or whatever other kind of mental health issue, after they become a teacher, after the first few years of teaching, or within the first few years of teaching, it is like it's something like a 10 to 20%.
Yeah.
You're more likely to contract that than anyone else going into any other profession, which
Yep.
is just insane. It just like to me like highlights the fact that like this is something that needs to happen because that will end up directly affecting your students.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. My dissociative episodes were not ongoing in a lengthy sort of way. Bless you. So ongoing in a
Hard to keep it cool. I feel like it's gonna backfire and I'm gonna be like,
'tis the season in Indiana. I mean, it snowed this morning. How ridiculous was that? Hello, April. Okay, so my dissociative episodes were not like ongoing for months. It was very brief. And I mean, I taught less than 24 hours after my first ever panic attack. Um, and so I, that morning, went up to my department head and was like, hey, listen, I live over there. There's some stuff going on. I'm not okay. I am going to holler if I need something. And he offered to send me home immediately. And I'm like, no, alone in the apartment's not going to be helpful in my universe. Because of that was pre the dog. The dog is an effect of my mental health. Not he wasn't here before that. He is a help afterwards. But those first few times he came down every passing period to see if I needed a break for a second. And there were a couple times where I would go down and get him. I haven't had those many times, and I try to not. If I have it in front, if I dissociate in front of a student, I try to. This is again, I have control issues. Let's own this. I try to make sure that there's another adult present. So when I, for instance, when I dissociated at the theater practice, my co-producer was there to run things. And so I know at this point in the game what my escalation arc looks like where my cue is on where I need to intervene in myself. I know that if my shoulders don't stay down, I'm in trouble. If I start to get this kind of tense, I'm going over the edge. There's no way once those are up, I can't stop it. And so I know to watch for those. It was a bit of a learning curve. But we get real good at hiding it. Which we think is a victory often. And it's not. Like, again, you kind of keep brushing it under the carpet and it's not going away. It's just a big pile under the carpet that will be visible at some point in time. And so there were a lot of moments where I shoved it. It was Tech Week for a show that Friday. We opened that Thursday after the explosion on Saturday. So I was there, I was in it. And heavy duty in it. It was crazy. And went down to pick up costumes. They were missing a couple, and I burst out into tears at the costume shop. I'm like, this has nothing to do with you. I'm sorry. Because I was just lost at that point. And any small thing like that was gonna throw me over an edge. And so the dissociative, yeah, did it affect my kids? 100p, hundo p. It was absolutely a problem. Because for those who didn't understand it, they just like suddenly, because I go angry before I go silent, and I am not a mad person by nature. And so when I get snippy, they're like, what's going on? And so they probably learned my escalation before I did, honestly. And so there was definitely a year in there that I don't think I was fully functional, and I can't honestly assess what that was to the kids, because I wasn't fully present, because I was again trying to rehearse my storytelling for it so that it was the pretty version of whatever my mental health issues were going to be when I showed up. So it was kind of under control before I got help, which is stupid. That's what the help's for. So I can't honestly answer that. I've only in my career had students disassociate a couple times. It hasn't been significant as far as the students on that front. And so it was new to me as well by the time it started happening. And I'm like staring off at a wall for an hour and a half. I'm like, what was that? And so, yeah, Google can be your best friend and your worst nightmare, let me tell you. But through the seeking out kind of the mental health professional end of things, they were really helpful in that. But that was not a huge part of my experience, and it wasn't ongoing. Then again, I've shoved all of that so far down that who knows if I'm being real right now. I don't know.
Right.
I'm not intentionally lying about it. I just don't know if I remembered accurately.
And I wonder, I just kind of wonder, like, I mean, it's been a minute now since like all that was happening.
Yeah.
Like, I just wonder, like, compared to other years, like how that affected your ability to like really connect with students and like foster those relationships that you talked about caring so much about, and like what successes you saw in like their academics or like in that relationship building like throughout that year compared to, or years compared to other years.
Right.
It
Yeah, like I said, it has been, I mean, it's
right,
been a decade-ish.
right,
So my ability to remember specifics from that would be terrible under normal circumstances. Middle age, I'm just saying, it's not pretty for the memory. But
like
for sure.
like for you to like even try to like, I mean, you're at that point in your life when you're going through something one that you've never really experienced before.
Right.
You're not worried about the stuff that's normal.
Right.
You're just like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong
Yeah.
with me? Or I don't care. Nothing's wrong with me. I don't want to think about it. So like
Right.
you're so focused on doing that that like anything else kind of takes the back burner, and your memories of that time,
Are
like
gone.
right, we like it's all about those moments.
Right.
And especially with how like you're thinking about like what triggered it, what did this, what did that, and with much of it like going to the dress shop, like it you can't pinpoint it. Your brain's not well. Like,
Right.
so it may
Right.
be something that is directly related to the event that caused all these issues in the first place, or it could be something that's in no way related.
Right.
And
I around that time, accurate, yes, I was serving as a national officer for my sorority at that point in time. And I was doing visits for recruitment. And one of our larger chapters had a house tradition that before the first night, as the people are every party, every time, large campus, every time as they start to come in for that first round, before they start singing the song and open the door, every last one of like 80 women in the house grabbed a wall and banged. And every time it came out of my skin. Every time I knew it was coming, I knew who it was, I knew what was going on. Again, the irrational interrupts the rational over the course of that. And like every time I like jumped and squealed and then laughed because it was stupid because it was them singing again. But you can't plan for that. Like you can't plan for the dress shop missing 2 costumes. You can't plan for sorority recruitment being crazy. It's gonna be. You can't plan for a whole bunch of stuff out there. The world doesn't run around avoiding your triggers, and you don't necessarily, especially early on, know what all of them are going to be. And
Even
it can change ongoingly.
right, even after you do, it's not consistent.
Yeah.
Like I could not know where my keys are one day and I'm fine. Like it's okay. I'll be a couple minutes late. And another day it's like the end of the world. Like my
Yes.
pounding and I don't know what I'm doing and my
Yep.
life is meaningless. Like it's
Right.
absolutely like you just it goes out of control and it ramps up so quickly and you as you become more aware of like what that ramping up looks like, you can kind of avoid it a little more and
Right.
bring it
Right.
down a little easier. But even
Yeah.
still, like the triggers are they're
Yeah,
just
I mean, I was a Colts season ticket holder for a really long time. After this happened, I started not showing up on time. You know why I didn't show up on time? I could avoid huge crowds and go with moderate crowds if I didn't show up to the game on time. If I came in midway through the first quarter, the concourse was pretty easy to get through. Um, and I'm not sure it was a conscious decision when it started happening, but it was self-preservation, you know. And so you figure out what those things are as you go through, and it will come back. I will forever, I joke about past me planning things for future me, and as you well know, because we've talked about this, past me was really smart and planned a massage for future me for tomorrow. So high five, past me. That was awesome of you. um the I've hit the one week after the Pfizer second dose, so I'm as good as it's going to get. So I'm going to go get a massage. Thank you. Um, but looking at kind of like past me planning some of those things as I go through, I just kind of joke around with myself a lot about, um, you know, what are the things going to be that I need down the road in order to take care of myself. And even weird stuff like the dog. Like he went and got boarded last Thursday when I got shot too, because I didn't know what I was going to feel like. I didn't want him to have to deal with me being down. I didn't want me to have to deal with me being down and him. He's a 60-pound pit mix. He can make his presence known. And so he got boarded for a couple days, and I stocked up on everything I needed around me so that I'd be all good and cozy. I've gotten way more kind of like mentally into what am I going to need when that thing happens, so that I know what those are, and kind of have my like little self-care pocketbook, I guess, going on of like file through the file folders. What do I need to do to make myself okay through this experience? And so, yeah, there's a lot of that has been a slow growing process, giving myself permission to need those things. My very first therapy appointment, I will never ever forget. She's sitting there knitting at the desk when I walk in. She goes, "Oh, so what are your hobbies?" And I'm like, "Well, I like to go to the theater and I like to read and I like to hang out with my friends." She's like, "No, no, 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 no." And I'm like, "What?" She goes, "That's not what I mean by hobby." I'm like, "Okay, what do you mean by hobby?" She's like, "When you can't get out of bed, when it's one of those days, what do you do?" And I went, "Stare at the ceiling?" She's like, "Yeah, you need a hobby." Um, and so I keep a file folder of those, like when I can't go out, when it's one of those. And luckily, past me, a little over a year ago, made an appointment because we had tapered me off of my meds like 5 or 6 years ago. And I started feeling a little, as I told the doctor when I went in, I'm like, you know how if your car is not quite in tune and it revs too high all the time, I'm like, that's what I feel like right now. And 100% of the time while I'm awake. But I went in February of 2020, which put that on a calendar. That was fortuitous timing. So we got me on meds in February, which means the 1 month dosage checkup was in March over spring break a year ago. And I called in because they were doing remotes and she's like, "What are we doing?" "Oh, your timing's beautiful." I'm like, "Oh, my timing's perfect. Thank you very much." But knowing that again, over the summer, because I was starting to rev again, I called her. I'm like, "We talked about upping the dosage 3 months ago." And I said, "No, because I was fine. I'm not." So we need to do the thing. So I'm getting better at learning how to kind of get ahead of it a little bit. And being honest with myself about the med needs. Sometimes people really stigmatize the need to be on mental health related meds, but again, my brain chemicals are not fake. And my body does not do good things with serotonin like normal people. So I need a little assistance with the SSRIs, thank you. And then it's better. And so we're in a good place on that right now. Past me has been very thoughtful in a way that I couldn't have anticipated would be brilliant, because I didn't know we were like getting ready to jump into a pandemic when it started. It was fortuitous timing at its best. But still kind of getting that kind of backstock of like, I know I will need to do these things to take care of me in the situation, and has become kind of, no matter what the new situation is, kind of where my brain goes. When they decided we were going to come back after spring break with 100% of the students in the building ish, let's not lie, not 100% of the students are coming back, but with everybody having the opportunity at least to be in the building 4 days a week, I was like, well, what's the first thing I need to do for me to be okay with this, which is rearrange the room, because I need to fit 8 more desks in here. So like the meeting's going on, I'm like, 8 more desks, thank you. So that I could, because I need to have those kind of like the ugly, not fun pieces of teaching run themselves. I need to have the seating charts done so that I can focus on, that's not my strength as an educator, that like the paper pieces, the jigsaw is not my favorite part. It's the talking to the kids and the content. That's my stuff. And so I need that to run on its own. So I immediately, within 5 minutes of that meeting being done, I was like halfway through my new seating charts and like everything was done, because I needed it to be, in order to be able to focus on the stuff that was going to keep me better through this. And if I keep me better, I can also be honest about talking to the kids about keeping them better. They all know what safety measures we're using when we come back, because I've been, every time they look a little scared, I'm like, listen, that little air purifier in the back of my room is not going anywhere. I have 2 more cases of Germex over here. We're fine. I keep spritzing down your desks with the bleachy stuff every day. It's good. So that by being really honest with them about kind of and that's physical health interventions, but also mental health interventions that we're keeping along the way, providing them and myself with tools throughout it, and being really honest about like, dude, it has been 3 weeks. We've been working our tail off. Let's do a creative writing assignment today, because I feel like I need a break and you need a break. Let's take a break.
Yeah.
That's a valid thing, like acknowledging those moments. Again, what are we modeling for them?
Right.
And I think that's essential.
Right. And just like that, like you built a COVID toolkit. Teachers have teacher toolkits, like we all know about them.
Yeah.
At least in like my pre-service teacher program that I'm in right now, like it's required of us to build literally a teacher's toolkit. We have so many projects where like that's it. You're making it. You're continuing it in some form. You can add it to one you made before. Whatever you need to do, you're making your toolkit.
Yeah.
So why not have a mental health toolkit for teachers, for students?
Absolutely. And I have a page that I've embedded in my Canvas class that is just like, if you are familiar with Bitmoji classrooms, what I do when I get stressed is create pretty arty things. And so like my Canvas is stellar, thank you. But one of the things they have is a classroom relaxation corner that they can go to. And when I get stressed, I go curate it and add some different links, but it's like oddly satisfying cake videos and like breathing exercises and live streams of puppies playing. And whatever you click on in there will link you to something that is that thing. So we gave them the guided tour throughout, and it's really funny. My advisory class, I hadn't set up anything on my Canvas page with them, and one of them had me in the other class and was like, oh, can we have that in the advisory class thing too? And I was like, sure. And I've looked at this, like they're using it. It's getting hits. Yeah. So again, that like what works for you. And I'm like, these are things I can imagine working for you because they kind of work for me. I will be living on the puppy link because it makes me happy.
Have a room in there where like the students can talk to each other.
I do a lot of breakouts in class where I intentionally am moving them around within. We use Google Meet as our kind of schools because we're Google. So I intentionally do a lot of kind of small group exercises in there so that they can get into a room physically or not, with another student and interact. And sometimes it's like, here, do something related to the content. And sometimes literally the content I'm teaching them is talking to each other, because we've lost that for some of them this year. And that, again, if you're a human connection person, then this being at home thing is a real challenge.
Right.
And there's no matter how many of your friends drive past your house on your birthday, it is not the same.
Also, like, even if you think that you're not someone who needs human connection, studies have shown us we all do in some
Yes.
capacity or another. Whether you're talking to someone for 5 minutes a day, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You need to be talking to someone at some point. You can go a few days maybe without, and it's fine because that's who you are and it doesn't bother you. But people need people.
Yeah. And I think the organic nature of watching that happen over the last year with the adults in the building has been intense. As soon as we went remote last year, one of our guidance counselors started holding like Wednesday night social hours on Zoom. And like 60 of us or whatever would like log on. We'd go around, chat, see what's going on in your life, need anything, everybody good. Like just sitting around chatting and being together in some format.
Right.
Over the course of that, there'll always be one teacher over there like showing us what he was grilling for dinner that night, like so that we could just share life a little bit in
Right.
that setting.
Which is something that, I mean, in all schools, but like especially in Perry, like having gone there, like that is something
Yeah.
that happens so naturally in that building all
Yes.
the time. All the
Yes.
time. Everyone is always connecting with everyone else in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people, yes, that in some way get left out of that a little bit. But even if they do get left out of that in the building, they're finding that in their relationships with people
Right.
who share that experience from being in the building
Yes.
outside of it. So like that is something that I think that in like one of those like silver linings of COVID, like we've learned how much we need each other.
Yeah.
And we, I think, have been brought to value our time together so much more.
Yes.
Our ability to talk to each other or just be in the same room together
Right.
or anything, like to have 10 minutes on Zoom together where you're not just listening to a lecture is just
Yeah.
nice. Like
Yeah.
I had that today. I talked to a girl for like 30 minutes on Zoom while we were just waiting for like
Yeah.
field experience to start. And I haven't chatted with a classmate in I couldn't
Right.
tell you how long. And
Yeah.
it was so nice.
And
But
that's probably what you were talking about with the chat thing. It just hit me. At the end of class, the way that we've got the schedule structured right now is that we see the students, whatever that means, twice a week. So when we come back, we have 7 periods. We will have 1, 3, 5, 7 on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're keeping as a professional development teacher only in the building day. And then Thursday, Friday is the even number classes and then our advisory period. So because of the way that works, we have an hour and a half with each student, but we've really focused on trying to consciously limit the amount of out of class work happening. I mean, they've got all day Wednesday to do homework, but they shouldn't have to. It's a pandemic. I keep saying that. It's a pandemic, people.
even when it's not a pandemic,
Right.
like
And I think that we're re-examining a lot of that. But the way we've got stuff structured right now is we have basically like an hour of class time and then a half an hour of guided supported work time. And so sometimes my guided supported work time is like we stay in the room and we like work on stuff together. But for the most of it, that last half hour is theirs to structure as they want. And I have another Bitmoji classroom that allows them to go into different Google breakouts based on how they want to function that day. So there's a room, they can stay in the main chat with me and ask questions and get feedback on work. They can go to a silent room and work, but then they'll still have access to me if they ask questions that direction. They can go to one where they can just type in chat back and forth if they need help on something with a peer, and I give them a conversation couch. And if they want to camera on, mic on, all you go chat, that's absolutely fine also, because they need that. And do I make sure that it's not like the same kid who hasn't turned an assignment for 3 weeks going into the conversation couch every week or every time? Yeah, absolutely. But sometimes they need that too. Like I'm not policing it. I'm not. And because that's an important part of their existence. And like, if I see one person is up there, I will like hop on the mic and be like, hey, so Joey's up in the conversation couch. If anyone wants to go chat, he's kind of by himself right now. So someone go talk to that boy. And so I will recruit people up to them so that they have somebody to chat with, because it's an important part of it. And they know that I can listen in. They get that. I'm not hiding the fact that the teacher can kind of eavesdrop a bit. But that also, it's funny, I've got one class that every time I just leave it on so I can hear, and I just keep it in the background, make sure they're being appropriate with things, because sometimes sophomores. And every once in a while you can watch one of my students go, Miss Davis. Like, yes. I was hoping you could hear me. I have a question. I'm like, all right. So that the human connection piece, it will find a way. And it's better if we give it a structured way to happen. And for the teachers, even when we went fully remote, let me get this accurate. I think it was the first time. I think it was the post-Thanksgiving fully remote piece of the puzzle. It was the second day. The first day I taught in my room all day, because we had 15-minute breaks between class, but I don't teach the same class back to back ever. It's a curriculum change every time in that 15 minutes for me. And I just barreled through, and I'm like, I can't do that. First of all, I can't sit this long. Like I'm like, I am a middle-aged woman. I have got to get up and move, or I'm just going to be walking like I am folded in half for the rest of the day. So that's thing one. And second of all, I can't just stare at a wall all day. This is not an okay place for me to be. And so I stepped out, and it was funny. It was like 12 different clusters of people walking laps around the hallways for 10 of the 15 minutes. Like, and it became a thing that was every passing period you could walk out, and people would be like, let's go downstairs this time, and would go like walk around different areas of the building to check in on people they hadn't seen for a while, to get out and moving, and just to talk to each other. And so again, the community will find a way if you give it a ramp to get there from here. You give it a little bit of a channel, and it will keep driving itself. And that's for us or the students either way, I think.
Yeah. Well, I love this conversation, and I know that we could talk all night.
We could. It's us.
We can.
It's true.
Not at least for the purposes of this. So I'm going to go ahead and transition us into those rapid fire questions that I sent you beforehand.
I have not looked, so I'm excited.
Okay, cool. I think that one of them you're going to be like, oh, she had to ask this. And I'm not going to tell you which one it is, even when I'm asking it, because I want to see if you can All right. Okay. First, really quite generic for a teacher to ask this. Why did you become a teacher, and why have you stayed in the profession?
Why did I become a teacher? Because in kindergarten, at the last day of school, we could take like quarters in and buy, this is totally not a thing that's okay, but we could do it. You could buy like the samples school books that they sent to sell you for their curriculum. And I bought like an English set in kindergarten, and I played school with my stuffed animals all summer, and I thought it was the best thing ever. So in kindergarten, I was going to be a teacher. By the time I was in 5th grade, it was going to be high school English. By the time I was in 8th grade, I would walk in, my teacher would be like, Stefanie, do you want to teach next week? And I'd be like, yes, what am I teaching? And she would give me the materials, and I'd create lessons. 8th grade. Yeah.
You had that like as a resource.
It was awesome. It really was. Like, she was letting me teach chapters out of Steinbeck novels in 8th grade. That's crazy, but it did happen. Yes. So that was awesome. And I kind of I can't say never look back. I mostly didn't look back. There were a couple times where I'm like, I'm going to do international business. I'm like, no, you're not. What are you doing? And just figured it was a way to like get paid to hang out with cool people and talk about really nifty topics that I was crazy passionate about. And how have I stayed in it all this way? By making intentional choices to shake it up when I needed to shake it up in order to keep myself interested, because I'm very much an enthusiasm-based educator. And if I'm not excited about it, I'm going to find it very difficult to get my students excited about it. Nice.
Cool. Yep. All right. If you could select one or two values that you would consider your core values, like if an alien, I'm stealing this question a little bit from my favorite. Dr. Brené Brown, her podcast.
There we are. Yes, understandable.
But if an alien came down and they were observing you and they were like, these are her core values, what would those be? And
Yes.
how does being a teacher feed these values for you?
Yes. I greatly value human connection. So I connect with humans for a living. I joke, there's that whole meme of like, describe what you do badly. And I'm like, I love my description of what I do badly because it sounds terrible. I breathe in a specific way that makes teenagers think things. Uh, Isn't that awful? I love it.
I don't know what that means. Like,
I do all speaking is exhaling in a specific way that makes things
okay. I was like, what?
That's all it
In
is.
my mind, I was picturing you physically, like your students notice the way that you breathe. Like you breathe weird
They
or
do.
something.
Yeah.
And so like they're like, this
I lost Emma for a moment.
that Davis does, this way that she breathes, that's going to what breathes life into my education.
Yep, that's exactly it.
But
It's just speech. Uh, but so the human connection piece, I think that's pretty obvious. Like that's primarily how I drive my classroom. And I think beyond that, I value growth. I tell, especially my speech kids, like the goal by the end of the semester is better, no matter what that looks like for you, the goal's better. So if you're trying not to pee down your leg in the first speech, knowing you're not going to pee down your leg in the last speech makes me perfectly happy for you. You've grown. If you are the person who's like, speech, these are my people, I shall start a professional tour circuit then cool, we're still going to tweak you a little bit and make you better. And so that growth piece of the puzzle and kind of looking at self-assessment as we go through so that they can see that they're growing is something that I've really kind of in the last few years fine-tuned in my classroom to make more readily available for them as they go through. So I think those are the two big things that I value.
Okay.
And how they show up in my classroom.
Nice. It actually, so I feel like for a lot of teachers, the values that you have are going to very easily relate to it. But I
Yeah.
think that with some people, it could also be very surprising when they're like thinking about like, what are my core values? Oh, wait, what am I doing here?
Right.
Or like, how can I reframe this for myself and like really like reconnect with those core values
Yeah.
and like,
Well, and I think it's shifted for me also since I started doing the ITJP research. And that class inherently is a whole different beast than anything else going on in that building. Because I've got 17-year-olds going through an institutional review board to identify a research gap in a field of study, design a actual experiment and or research study, conduct the sucker, and write a 4,000 to 5,000 word piece of original scholarship that they then present and defend to a panel. It's lunacy. And I love every minute of it because it's easily for the kids who take this class, the biggest academic challenge of their existence. And they're students who like success, but most of them come from like a gifted and talented background. And so I'm not sure they've always had a really positive experience with growth.
right. And like being challenged in a certain
Yes.
way.
I tell them, I'm like, this is maybe the first room, and it likely is the first room in your educational career that you are walking into that you are wholly unqualified for.
Right. Yes. Okay, we're gonna move on.
Yep.
What are your top 3 favorite TV shows, or you only get to pick one, or movies of all time? As in, if you only had to watch these 3 things for the rest of your life and nothing else, what would they be?
This is the easiest because my next door neighbor teacher, who likes to throw out some top 3, top 5 lists every once in a while, and so I do adapt this from time to time. But my top 3, I know off the top of my head without even thinking. Is this the one you thought was going to be hard for me?
Yes, I'm honestly surprised because I feel like if anyone were to ask, and we're not the same, but if anyone were to ask me this, like because I'm such a consumer of like beautiful or just like cool or amazing like productions in whatever form, like music,
Yes.
theater, TV, movies, whatever, books,
Right.
whatever, I'd be like, give me a decade, I'll figure this out.
No.
I wouldn't be able to figure out after the decade because.
Absolutely. I know easily. The top two haven't changed forever. Not forever, because the number one has been number one since I first saw it. And it's the only movie I've ever like walked out of in a theater and bought another ticket to go watch it again immediately, which is going to be a surprise to you. This is not a line that you're thinking of for me. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
Spider-Verse is the best film ever made. I will plant my flag on that hill and fight that battle. And the animators behind the next one have said that the animation on part two is going to make the first one look, and I quote, quaint. And I am giddy with enthusiasm because it was beautifully drawn. And it's exquisite and I love it.
It is really, really good.
It's ridiculous. I love it so much. And like I work the soundtrack I run the sound for our pep sessions when we have those. And I work the soundtrack into the pep session music every time. Like, who's running that? I'm like, oh, Davis is again. Number two, The Prestige. Love it. One of a handful of movies I have ever watched, stopped, and then rewound because it was videotaped. That'll tell you something. And watched it again. So if you've not watched The Prestige, do it. It will blow your mind. It's so beautiful and it's so well done. And it made my brain fall out and do jumping jacks. It was very exciting. Number three is the only one that's going to be a close call for me, because if you had asked me a year ago, the answer would be Get Out. I will watch Jordan Peele direct paint drying and be perfectly happy as a human being because it'll be the best paint drying I've ever seen in my life. But now we have to add in Hamilton having been released over the summer. And we know I have a relationship there.
No, you have a relationship, but so it is filmed.
Yep.
But it's not a movie.
I mean, it's been nominated for.
It's filmed very well. It's like usually like stage productions. They just don't try as hard to film them well.
Right. Well, and they filmed it over 3 days. They spent like 6 hours doing crane shots, so they didn't have to. So you have the audience reaction on all of the distant stuff, and then the crane shots were shot separately. And so they were really able to do what they needed in order to make it good. If you're going to disqualify it because it's theater, and I would be perfectly fine with saying that I will keep that on a stage. That is absolutely a-okay. We know I've seen the show 5 times on a stage. I will gladly see it a 6th. That is fine. I will gladly put Jordan Peele back on my list at the number 3 spot because Get Out's genius and I love it.
I am afraid to watch it. I
See, it's not that kind of scary. Like there's one jump scare in the whole thing.
Okay, but even I just can't, like, I really do like psychological things.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like Shutter Island ruined me.
I think Shutter Island's way scarier than Get Out.
Okay. Also, people like the hype around Get Out was just, it was too big. Like it scared me more because I don't remember Shutter Island coming out. So or like any of like those other movies. And I just
like you got to kind of hug the fact that like Peele can, like, his stuff is like, it's horror, yes, but it's the social commentary on it obviously I think outranks the horror piece. He uses the horror as a tool, and he does it in a way I think a lot of modern horror films get so caught up in like what special effects can we use to freak people out that they forget about the story.
I don't feel like that is as much a thing anymore. I don't know. Maybe it's also because I completely avoid like, you cannot force me. I've been tricked once in my life into going to a scary movie and watching it all the way through and did not want to be there and wanted to leave the theater but couldn't because I didn't drive myself there, and it's just like a thing. But I didn't even get to buy my ticket. I had no idea because they told me we were going to see something else.
Right. Oh,
so I just avoid at all costs. Like I don't do it. And so now kind of my filter for that, because Chetty pushes me in very good ways, my good friend pushes me in very good ways for this reason, and he's like opened up my life to so much more beyond, like, I'm already pretty open to like most things film related, but he's like, you can handle this, we're gonna watch. And I'm like,
it's so good.
No, but yeah, no, just like with anything, like he's like that. And
Yeah.
I don't even know if I don't know if he's seen Get Out. I don't remember.
I now know my in ramp here. I'm just going to talk to Chetty and get him to like be like, let's watch this together, and then you'll be fine.
Maybe he's not here right now, so you can't talk to him.
It's true. I've got some time to work on.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Who was your favorite teacher and why?
Oh my. Okay, so are we aiming at like K-12?
It's up to you.
Man.
Because
Um,
I could do, like, I have one probably from K through 6. I have one from 7 through
like
12.
I have a
I have one,
K-12,
I have
but then
one
I
from
also have like, the higher education piece of the puzzle is a whole
right.
other gig
And
also.
so, and I also have that because I was like, there's no way, like, this teacher is my favorite forever and always. And then I was like, nope, just kidding, this one.
Right.
And then I've experienced one more like that in
Yeah.
college, and she is just my bread and butter. I love her so much. I don't talk to her as much, like, post having her in class,
Right.
but I would love to.
Right.
Most of the
I'm gonna break your rules. Because it's me. Okay, so K-12, hands down, Ron Shepard was my government teacher, which seems like, you wait until the grand finale of high school there. But the best, most challenging educator of my K-12 experience. My graduating class was ridiculously academically competitive. We had 4 valedictorians and 3 salutatorians when I graduated. Yeah, he wasn't afraid of us. He may have been, huh? We all tied.
that's crazy.
Yes. Like they started researching when we were in 3rd grade AP curriculum for the high school because they knew they would need it for us. Like it was lunacy. But he was probably the first teacher who was not in any way, shape, or form intimidated or afraid of us. And he brought it, and he had us contract for our grades at the beginning, and everything was a challenge, and he made us fight for every success. And I like a good competition. And he's like literally one of the nicest, most caring humans, but he was going to turn us into students rather than just people who got A's. And I appreciated that. Undergraduate, hands down, Kathy Carlson. She is a retired professor from Franklin College. She was a professor of several of my English courses while I was there. And additionally, she served as my kind of unofficial academic advisor for a couple of years as well. She was honest and trusting and challenging and wise, and she now does all kinds of she started teaching like yoga remotely during the pandemic. Like when you look at like people who understand what they need as a human, in addition, Kathy's it. And she was one of the most supportive human beings I've ever met in my life. Grad school, I'm going to go a slightly different route. While I had brilliant people at IUPUI in my comm department, the formative educational experience of grad school for me, I was actually not a full professor. I was out at Southern Oregon University for 3 years doing I did 3-week limited residencies out there, working with the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, doing graduate work in theater. And going into my 3rd year there, I took a directing class with 15 peers from an actor who unfortunately passed away. His name is G. Valmont Thompson, G. Val. And G. Val was a brilliant actor and director, but also gave me a challenge that I did not earn that I will forever appreciate from him. What we did is, going into that summer, we read 6 plays, and they gave each of us, they did 4 groups of 4. And so we and 3 of our peers were assigned to a play. And we were given like an 8-minute scene that each of us individually directed, separate from the other 3 directors, with the same 2 actors. So the same 2 kids were doing the same scene 4 different ways with 4 different directors. Was kind of our big ongoing. We had like a week and a half to get this bad boy up and rolling. It was crazy. And he assigned us a scene from, oh, why am I not going to get it now? 7 guitars. Yeah, 7 guitars, which is part of the August Wilson Century Cycle. definitive work of modern African American theater. I am a white chick. All of us were not Black who were directing it. He was Black. G-Val was Black. And when he came over to meet with us, he turned us loose to talk about how we were going to run the directing thing before they brought the kids in to us. And Southern Oregon's not terribly ethnically diverse. So we were immediately like, what do our kids look like? Like, are we going to be like for mostly white folks directing two white kids in this? This is weird. And G-Val came over and he's like, how are we going to attack this? I said, well, our biggest discussion so far is that we have to focus on like, who are the people? Because we can't relate to huge parts of their experience, but the people need to come through. And then he brought our actors in and they were both strawberry blonde white kids. We're like, well, this will be interesting. And so it's definitely 4 scene portrayals that should never be seen in public. Not one of us had a right to touch it except through G-Val qualifying us for it, and him trusting us with it. And he would pop into rehearsals and then just walk out because he was trusting us with it. And it was a piece he had acted in. And like, it was something very close to him. And we were all about ready to throw up when we were getting ready to do performances that day. And none of us had seen each other's performance with it. Yeah. So we had no idea. We had to come up with, because I mean, we had, I think 8 total rehearsal times with our students. Both of whom, gosh, they were good. But figuring out in 8 like half-hour rehearsals how you're going to communicate what you need, and then they're going to go do the same 8 minutes with a different person in the next 30 minutes. So we had codes and it was pretty quick. I looked at Sam and I was like, energy. And I looked at the girl who was in the scene and went and said, you're doing colored greens. She's like, okay. Cause she started out cleaning vegetables. Every last one of us had picked a different vegetable. And so we watched all of the 8 minutes in a row. And then G-Val would take us over into the makeup room and kind of debrief on what he saw. And we were all like, oh. So we get our performances done and we were all pleased with what our kids did with our scenes. And we went next door into the makeup room and we're like, he's like, a friend of mine from the festival called me this morning and said, what are you doing, G-Val? And I said, well, I'm doing this directing class and here's what we're doing. And they're like, cool, what plays did you choose? And I told them and they're like, wait, you turn people loose with August? He goes, yep. And they're not one of them Black. And the guy's like, you are crazy. And he said, I'm not crazy. I'm hopeful. He said, because the only way you guys were going to be successful on this is if you were able to see the people in the story. And I could see that you saw the people. And so not only was I hopeful about the scenes, but seeing the scenes has made me hopeful about people. And I don't think there could be anything ever more impactful as far as a conversation between an educator and a student than those few minutes in that makeup room after directing August Wilson, which I should never do again, but my gosh, it was awesome. What was happening. That material is great. And an honor to dip my toe into that pool.
Right. Also just like, so he got hope out of it.
Yeah.
But such a big part of that for him was faith.
Yes.
A big part of that for you was challenge. And like each of those pieces challenge faith and hope. That's just, that's just beautiful to me. And I feel that should be more of what teaching is. And that should be more of what any relationship is.
Right. And I mean, the risk that it wasn't our risk. Like, we literally did not have any skin, to use the right terminology here, in that game. It dealt with the quintessential Black man's experience in the 1940s. Like, I got nothing. The risk was entirely him, because he had the connection with the piece and he had the history with the piece and he had the history with August. And like, all of that was his risk. And to watch him go, here's the baby. Let's see what you can do with it. And knowing that he was handing that off to 4 people that were going to have to deal with not only their own blind spots in directing that piece, but also to like 20-year-old white kids from Southern Oregon,
Mm,
who also were going to have to portray an experience that they were never going to have. But at
right.
the same point in time, the scene he gave us was also very smart in that it was like a lost love sort of scene. So there's a universality to the experience, but he had to risk being disappointed in a work he loved. And that is
Yeah.
a pretty scary place to be.
That's
I imagine
that's
for,
vulnerability.
yeah. And we all had to be over the course of that. Like people were doing Doll's House, whatever. Angels in America even was whatever by comparison to this. But it was the most amazing challenge. And when he told me, I was like, okay. He's like, trust yourself. He goes, I'm trusting you, so you got to trust yourself.
Mhm.
And
God,
that was who he was as a human being, was the person that was willing to lay it all out and risk pain in
right,
order to help other people get the point. And he was that on stage, he was on that, he was that off. He was a fabulous human being, and it was a gift to be able to work with him.
right. What an exercise. What an exercise
Yeah,
in vulnerability, in challenging yourself, in trust. Like
yeah,
that's it. That's
it
it.
was a
Okay.
lot. Yeah.
In one sentence,
Whew.
don't break this rule. Why should we explore work that encourages teachers and others to see teachers as people first?
The price of not doing so is humanity, and it's a price that's too high.
Cool. I like I well, thank you so much for
Oh
chatting
my
with
God.
me today. I live for it, quite honestly.
Always.
But yeah, we after this, I think that we're going to talk momentarily about some resources that we're going to provide to you guys here, relative to our conversation, relative to the work that we're encouraging others to do, um, and maybe a few fact checks here and there, just to make sure that anything that we said doesn't get misconstrued or was just blatantly incorrect,
Right.
because that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not feeding you lies. But again, thank you so much, so much. Um,
Always. Always.
and I'll see you later.
Yep. Alrighty. Thank you, girl.